of the cars that you sell, what percentage of them do you appraise? And it should be at least twice as many as you sell, which you would think that would be normal, but it's not. It's actually in most cases less.
Okay.
The more vehicles you appraise, the higher the trade capture, or if you sell 100 cars, what percentage of those have a trade-in? So that number almost doubled when you appraise more vehicles. So if there's not a high level of trust, I'd say that's the foundational principle of the whole thing, to where everybody's okay calling people out, or at least saying what's not working so that they can fix it.
Welcome to Retention Roadmap, Navigating Service Success for New Car Dealerships. I'm your host, Bill Springer. Today's podcast is sponsored by DriveSure. DriveSure helps new car dealerships remain the go-to provider for maintenance, tires, and repairs. For information on how DriveSure can help your dealership, go to drivesure.com/dealership solutions. My guest today is Brian Kramer of Cars Commerce, where he helps lead acquisition strategy and technology that turn the service drive into a reliable inventory pipeline. With AccuTrade, dealers can instantly appraise vehicles in the service lane, create transparent real-time offers, and source more used vehicles while improving the customer experience. Today, we'll dig into how this technology drives service retention, deal flow efficiency, and profitability. So, Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Bill. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. So let's just jump right into it. Help us understand kind of the original insight for AccuTrade and specifically, how to use the service drive for vehicle acquisition.
So I forget exactly what year it was, 17 or 18, I started using AccuTrade, and I initially started using it because I felt that it was the closest. I don't think there was a perfect solution, and I don't know that there is, but I felt it was the closest to what I would appraise vehicles for. So I started using it for sight unseen appraisals when I was at Germain Toyota of Naples in Naples, Florida, as the GM. Started using it for that. Got a lot of success. We were using some equity mining tools, but I noticed that my sales staff was really using it to pre-qualify clients, right? Because there's only like 11% of customers right now that have equity in their loans. And it was about that same number back then. Half the customers were trading out of their vehicles into a completely different vehicle. So using equity to try to get them into a similar vehicle, there's only a small percentage of clients that appeals to. So I wanted to focus on the other, whatever it is, 89%. The ones that paid cash, financed somewhere else, the ones that normally aren't approached, the ones that are, service not sold, and trying to go after them. But in order to go after them at speed and at scale, we were writing at that time about 3,000 repair orders, got it up to about 5,000 repair orders a month. In order to, touch and try to approach that many people, we had to not worry about all those things and just ask somebody if they wanted to buy their car, which is why we started using AccuTrade. It's very simple, point and click, that anybody can use it. When my daughter was 9, she used to be able to appraise cars with it. So it's basically just like doing a multi-point inspection on the exterior of the vehicle, like a valet would do, where you're taking pictures of the tires, you're taking a picture of the exterior, you're going around the vehicle, just like most ASMs will, or assistant service managers will do prior to the write-up. You're just having the salespeople or acquisition or valets or whoever it is doing it. Just because it's really simplified the process of appraising a vehicle. You scan it with an OBD scanner, and it gives you a number which we'll guarantee. So there's no risk to the dealer as long as they go through the steps. They actually measure the tread depth, take pictures of the exterior. There's no risk. So, for instance, in my old store, I think they average 120 to 150 cars a month. Still, we had acquired as many as 180 a month out of that dealership. It didn't start out that way. It started off at 10, 15, and then you build and you build. And it's a lot easier said than done. But I think that simplicity, enablement, empowering your people, those are the kind of the principal fundamentals of it. And then you've got all the other nuanceical elements of how do you get the service manager bought in? How do you get the service advisors bought in? Do you pay them a spiff? What's the pay plan look like? What's the pay plan for the salespeople look like? Do they sell cars? Do they not? Are they just acquisition agents? So once you define the guidelines, and I would say the guardrails of what ecosystem, just like in any part of the dealership, right? You don't want to micromanage people. So as long as you establish guardrails and don't do this and don't do this, just work within this framework, and you enable them, and you're okay that they're going to make some mistakes, here and there, just like they do in any other situation. But you just, accept that as a aggregated loss ratio like most other industries do. That's how we were able to, we generated, I don't know, sometimes $1 million or more in a month out of that team. And in the process, we're able to allocate more funds to service advertising, grow our RO count because we knew that we were going to, have that exponential compounding effect of being able to acquire cars off the service drive. Um, and our TLE skyrocketed because you close the RO out in the existing client's name, or if there's a service contract or something like that. So you're handling that, and then you would get the RO, where you get that person now is another retention piece on the new car they're buying.
Right.
So it's a great way to keep people within your brand, your ecosystem, and drive your retention.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'm curious, Brian, from your experience, to highlight some of the key kind of strategic differences between a dealership that really executes well in this process and a dealership that just does kind of an okay job at it. What's the difference between those two?
Well, I would say it's like this: once the process is defined, now it comes down to holding everybody accountable to that
Right.
process. And it's very similar to any other process, your service drive process. The best service drives are going out there and they're greeting the client. They're turning the wheels 45 degrees. They're checking the wiper blades. They're doing a battery test. They're doing all those things so that the upsell later is that much easier, right? When you have a really highly tuned finance department, and finance departments 30 years ago used to average $300 or $400 a copy. Now they're $2,000 a
Sure.
copy. And what's the difference? They go out to 100% of the customers, 100% of the time. They offer them 100% of the products in 100% the same way. And I think that's the same recipe on the drive, for write up or for service drive acquisition. Is you keep it insanely simple. You let everybody know what the expectation is, and you get everybody aligned to the goal. So what it looks like, or I should say what it doesn't look like, is you lay out this vision, because I see this happen often. Everybody says, well, this is great, this is going to be great, but they don't tell the services manager, or they don't tell the sales managers. Yeah. And then you've got these acquisition agents that go out and they're doing, the customer says, yeah, I'd consider selling you the car if the numbers made sense. And then they get that to go to the sales manager's desk and they say, hey, I just need a finalized number to show this couple. And they'll say, well, what car did you land them on? Well, they just want to know what their car is worth. That's not, we're not giving you numbers unless you have selection. So there's all these things like that, to where legacy processes intersect with innovation that will just stifle growth. And a lot of stores I see, when I start peeling back the layers and I start asking the frontline associates, what I find out is that they haven't told their GM, they don't want to rock the boat. They just stop playing the game. And they stop greeting customers. And next thing you know, you see them all. And it happened to my dealership at first. Well, actually not first, multiple times this cycle would reappear. But when they get frustrated like that, they just detach and then they go stand out front and they wait for a customer to walk in through the front door. Yeah. As you've got 30 people coming in through the side door.
Right.
So if there's not a high level of trust, I'd say that's the foundational principle of the whole thing, to where everybody's okay calling people out, or at least saying what's not working so that they can fix it.
Right. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit, Brian, about the importance of kind of the interdepartmental coordination and really who kind of owns the process or each part of the process.
Yeah. So I think one of the keys is you have to have a champion, whoever that is. Like in the sales department, typically there's an internet champion. It could be a BDC manager. It could be one sales manager that's the steward of internet close. But in every dealership, the general manager can walk up to one person and say, what's our month to date e-com close? What are new cars, e-com, used car e-com percentage, the 12, 15%, whatever the metric should be. And then they're going to ask them, what's our inbound phone close? And there's one person in every dealership that is responsible for that. There's a portion of their pay, 10%, 20%, that's tied to those metrics. And they answer that for the GM. But that's rarely the case when it comes to vehicle acquisition, specifically on the service drive. So there has to be somebody that's responsible on the sales side that knows how many ROs did we get today, what percentage of them did we appraise, and how many of those did we acquire on a daily basis. And I used to have it texted to me at the end of every night, that one person. And then there was a second person on that depth chart that if they went on vacation, that I could go, it was clear. Right? When that person's not here or they're tied up, this is the next in command for every single thing like that. But the reason why that position's extremely important is for a few things. If the managers get sales managers get bogged down by the service managers having, ambiguity, or they're unsure of something, one of the two of those entities are just going to shut the whole program down and say, until we figure this out, we're not doing anything. And then it rarely gets started up again. And that champion, or you call them a concierge, or orchestrator, if you will, they also have to be responsible for one of the most important things, which is putting all the ROs that were acquired that day on the service manager's desk. Service manager needs to be in the loop, because if they don't have this level of visibility, they will shut this thing down so fast with the GM and say,
Sure.
you're affecting my retention, which is by far the most important thing in any dealership. You're affecting the experience. You're affecting our reviews. You're affecting our CSI. All of those are like, out of bounds markers. And that's all they have to say. And everybody will say, pull the Ondon cord. We're shutting the whole assembly line down.
Yeah, right.
So how you prevent that is with the champion and a second in command champion. That champion puts the ROs on the service manager's desk. Service manager keeps the ROs open in the customer's name rather than putting them as an internal repair order, which would immediately lose the retention on that RO. So it'll make it look like you lost the customer, right? And the other thing it does is it lets you close it out to the extended service contract or prepaid maintenance if there was one. But the most important thing, more than those, is that it also has the service manager manually override it to pay the customer pay service advisor and the technician that did the inspection on that work when it's done through the used car department, because most dealers don't do that. And I made that mistake, fatal error, where our internal team was so busy they had to stay till 9 o'clock, and they're like, oh, I can't keep up with all this work. And it's the work that all these other ASMs and technicians were inspecting. They were getting paid on it at the used car labor rate, as they should. Now the ASM is wondering what's their spiff. The technician's like, what's in it for me? Why do I even do this? You're taking money out of my pocket. The other technicians are getting all this gravy work, in the used car team, when they're already can't keep up with the work that they already have.
Yeah.
When all of it can be avoided just with that champion orchestrating that, communicating it to all the right people. And the biggest benefit of all of that is you don't have to pay spiffs, because when you do that in that way, the service advisor becomes your best salesperson, because when they're talking to somebody and they said, oh, this 4-line RO is, that's a little bit more than what I was thinking. Let me think about it. I'm going to go check with an independent service provider and see if I can get it done cheaper. And at that moment, instead of paying spiffs, the service advisor is like, well, hey, at least if I take this in on trade, the used car department's going to recondition it. I'll get all this work. So they grab a salesperson and they tell their customer and their trusted advisor, hey, you might want to consider trading it in. So they become additional salespeople for you. And that's when it becomes a well-oiled machine.
Yep. A few months back, I had as a guest on a podcast, Pierre Mikhail Robatza from Urban Science, talking about the service to sales handoff. And they had some interesting statistics that they quote that only 15% of buyers were provided a trade-in value on their vehicle when they came in for service, as well as something like 13% of buyers were introduced to a member of the sales team during their last service visit. So I bring this up from the perspective of, can you talk a little bit about, Brian, about some of the key performance indicators that a dealership should really look at when they undergo an initiative like this for sourcing vehicles on a service drive?
Yeah, and it's interesting that those are the numbers that they came up with, because that's actually the exact same number that I came up with over the
Okay.
years. It was 15%.
Yeah.
And now that's what I determined was really as much as the capacity that I was able to staff for, because it's hard to keep up with it. But I also found in trying this out on, for years and years, acquiring 1,500 plus cars a year off the service drive, is that month in, month out, it would go, within 1 or 2 points from 15% of customers that were interested in a trade-in value. So as we would ask everybody, hey, if the numbers made sense and we paid you above market value, would you consider selling us your vehicle? About 15% said, I'd be curious. Now, there's also dealers that we work with that appraise 90 to 95% of the vehicles. So the metrics change a little bit, and that's a little different approach. And they want to do it similar to what, like a Carvana is doing right now with their value tracker, where we're going to do an always on engagement process to keep people engaged, because everybody's curious to know what their trade's worth. As I go around the country, I get dropped in these weird situations in front of, valet stands or in front of NADA, outside appraising cars with strangers or Ubers. And what I find is that every single person I ask if they know what their car is worth, almost all of them say no until I appraise it, and then I show them what the car is worth, and then in 2 seconds they looked it up in the last 30 days. Well, hey, CarMax said it was worth this, or Carvana said it was worth this, so they know. So everybody has an awareness, and I find that most dealers, I used to be one that was risk averse like this. I didn't want to appraise all these cars. What if I appraise 1,000 cars off the service drive a month? Well, then they're going to go shop me, and now I'm taking a customer that was totally engaged, that likes my service department, likes my brand, and now I'm causing them to go shop. However, what we recently did at Cars Commerce is we did a study of 120,000 appraisals with a bunch of large groups, anywhere from like 10 to 35 rooftops. And what we found is that the more vehicles you appraise, the higher the trade capture, or if you sell 100 cars, what percentage of those have a trade in. So that number almost doubled when you appraise more vehicles. And the number was dealers that appraised 2-to-1 versus 1-to-1 of how many cars they sell. And we also saw that the mistrade percentage went down. So the three metrics that everybody should look at is, of the cars that you sell, what percentage of them do you appraise? And it should be at least twice as many as you sell, which you would think that would be normal, but it's not. It's actually in most cases less.
Okay.
The trade capture, what percentage of your transactions have a trade in? National average is 34. It's 34% new and used, when 70% of clients have a trade. So obviously you want to be as close to 70% as you can, or higher. And then the mistrade percentage on dealers that don't appraise, 2-to-1 was over 20%. So 20% of their cars they appraised were conquested by somebody else. But when you appraise many more appraisals, it actually goes down into single digits. Just because when you tell them you've got to come in, your presence is your leverage, or you have to select another vehicle before I can tell you what your car is worth, when they can get on their phone and find those answers in 2 seconds, that's what causes the trades to be missed. Giving them a number, even if it's not, it has to be competitive, but it doesn't have to be the best number. At least prevents them from shopping.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm also curious, we started tracking for our dealership clients last year the what percentage of their new vehicle buyers are active service customers. So for every 100 new vehicles that you sell, what percentage of those came from customers who had been into the service department at least once in the last year? And that number on average comes into just under 22%. I'm not sure at this point what that means, whether
That's surprisingly low.
Is it? That's what I wanted to ask you about, because we're tracking this, but we're not sure what, other than looking at it going up and down. Really, is that a good, bad? What should the what should the target be?
I don't know, but I'd like to look into that, because that's a very interesting point you bring up. But it shouldn't be that low. I mean, I know when I was at Toyota, 70% was the price of admission in terms of retained over 0 to 3-year-old vehicles.
Sure.
So to have it be that low, now you're also, the average vehicle on the road's 13 plus years old, or almost 14 now, and then you've got a lot of service not sold, conquest, a lot of conquest. And so I guess that would be, if conquest is 50%, then you're probably there. But if I'm a dealer, I want it to be much higher.
Yeah, I mean, that tells me that basically 4 out of 5 customers are coming to you to buy a vehicle that have never been in your service department. So that's certainly an opportunity, but it's also why isn't it higher?
That actually does make sense now that I'm thinking about it, because there's a huge drop off after 3 years,
right,
as everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're off a cliff. Yep. And then they start going to Jiffy Lube, they start going to Valvoline and all the independent service providers, to which then we as dealers buy those lists from those companies to direct mail them,
right,
with the first party data that we already should have had, by getting them back into the service department to try to do win back campaigns and everything that happens like that, which is insanity. But yeah, actually that number probably is the right number if you factor that into consideration. You average, there's a lot more cars 3 to 10 years old
For
than there
sure.
is 0 to
For
3.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. We just recently did a study as well that showed we kind of looked at where a parts and service department gets the majority of their revenue. So if you look at total parts and service revenue for
Mhm.
the dealership, we looked at it by model year, and the 5 year, and it was a normal distribution curve right around a 5-year-old vehicle. So the 5-year-old vehicle is the age of vehicle when a dealership gets the most parts and service revenue from. The highest proportion of their parts and service revenue comes from 5-year-old vehicles. But it also goes, the 6 and 7 and 8-year-old vehicles obviously contribute quite a bit as well. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a real defection point at that 4 year mark, but they're still, still making up, those customers are still making up a really critical portion of the dealership's parts and service business for sure.
And how do you see that playing out in the next 5
Well,
years?
I think it's going to be a challenge in certainly 2026, 2027, 2028, because when you look at the number of vehicles that were sold during COVID, that had dropped pretty precipitously, and at the same time you get that typical defection risk, it just means that you've got to work even harder to retain you got to work a lot harder to retain the same number of customers you had been retaining. And you can just see it in the trend of numbers of just vehicles in service 0 to 5 years has dropped quite a bit.
I'll tell you something interesting that I just started looking at a lot more heavily in the last year is, we all spend a ton of time as dealers looking at, and I guess I'm not a dealer anymore. I always classify myself as one, but I look at it through the lens. But I used to be obsessed with my website, right? How many visits is the visit trend going up? Is my impressions trend going up? Where's the hot, the heat points on my website, specials page, appraise my vehicle, obviously schedule service. But I don't think that we do a good enough job as an industry. And we own Dealer Inspire websites, which has, more websites, 7,000 more websites than anybody else. And it's something that we're leaning towards, and we're going to take the lead on. But we should be looking at, what's my service traffic, not just the website traffic, but on the service page. Is it going up? Is it going down? Where are people bouncing on the user experience on my service page? And as I start looking at the Jiffy Lubes and Valvoline, which to me are like the CarMax and Carvana of the
Yeah.
service
Hmm.
department, and they gobble up market share, and you know there's a lot of things that can be done to prevent that. Their UX is frictionless and effortless on the website. Their websites are designed brilliantly to guide the customer through a product led journey, to where it just is intuitive and it makes sense. And we don't do that. Same thing goes for parts. I've seen all the McKinsey stuff, and I don't have any reason to doubt any of it, of what the exponential growth is going to be of fixed ops over the next 5 to 10 years. And I just found out that Brian Benstock was presenting this at an AI summit, but the number one query or searched term on Google is for automotive
Hmm.
parts, not just of the automotive business, but of any search done online is automotive parts. So it's the number one most searched item, and very few dealers have an online parts store to be able to ship and facilitate that right off their website, when it's the number one reason. I used to think it was scheduled service or it was praise my trade, but parts are actually the number one demand item that dealers don't take
Hmm.
advantage of.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, so I think it's going to be, as you stated at the top of our discussion, it's an exciting time and it's a challenging time, but I think it really creates an environment whereby there's some really innovative things that can be done to really drive service retention, and you got to do the same basic blocking and tackling that is necessary in order to retain customers. But I think there's an opportunity there as well that dealerships can really help themselves stand out from a quality of work perspective like never before, because vehicles are getting more complicated. They're staying on the road longer, that's for sure. But I think the level of trust that vehicle owners are putting in dealers is higher than it has been before. So yeah, I think there's a heck of a lot of opportunity there. So, Brian, before we let you go, I did want to kind of just ask you, kind of from a 30,000-foot perspective, what excites you about what you see as opportunities for dealers over the next couple of years?
And maybe we should do another follow-up podcast on that question. But I would say, the most, I heard it recently from Terrence Rasmussen at CarMax. He said the most overrated thing in the world is AI, and the most underrated thing in the world is AI. And there's going to be a lot of snake oil being sold with a, made with AI, stamp on it. But the ones that use it correctly, it's going to be able to take data sets like parts pricing or VIN decoding or build sheet data and all of these things that in in any time in the past was just too much. You got to hire a team of 100 programmers and dev people to be able to assimilate this and put it all and communicate this equals this. And AI is now ingesting all of
Yeah.
that, and we're doing it right now with our AccuTrade build data in order to build the ideal models to grab this information quickly. So what this is going to be able to do with service and being able to take all the op codes and the SPS pricing online and be able to sync it up and do real time calendar utilization with stall efficiency and all of these things to remote service, remote delivery, and have AI coordinate it all. Your part, how much, what parts you need to have, what parts are fast moving, and being able to really do the fine tuning on that stuff. Tie that into true e-commerce, agentic, protocols online. It's going to, I think, transform. If anybody wants to know, I think what the future of it looks like, just get on Chat GPT, research Walmart, what they're doing with agentic protocols and agentic commerce, and you'll see what every dealer should be doing and will be doing probably 18 months from now. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
But that's truly exciting to me.
That's cool. That's great. Well, we'll have to circle back and check in 18 months to see what see what it looks like. Brian, thanks very much for being with us. If any of our listeners would like to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can look up any social media channel, YouTube, Brian Kramer on LinkedIn, Instagram, you name it. I try to be on it, or just email me at bkramer, Kramer @cars.com.
Super. Brian, thanks very much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time.
No, I love the conversation, Bill. Thank you.
You've been listening to Retention Roadmap, Navigating Service Success for New Car Dealerships. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.